Cool. So yeah, Ida, thanks for taking the time to speak with me about this. We have a lot of pressing problems facing our city, and you're running for city attorney to try and solve some of those. I guess what would be helpful if you could start by introducing yourself and maybe tell us about the role of city attorney and what it is and what makes you qualified to be in that role.
Well, thanks so much, Johnny, for taking the time to talk to me and coming to the amazing, beautiful Barnsdall Park, which is where we're at now, which is one of my favorite spots in Los Angeles. I've been an activist for decades. I've actually done a lot of work in transit justice and mobility justice work. And before that, I actually worked in, one of the first things I did was volunteer with the Bus Riders Union and making sure that we have more equitable transit and we don't see racial profiling on our transit buses. And I've been an activist since I was 17 years old, and I work with Communities for a Better Environment to make sure that we don't reopen an oil refinery in Southern California, even investigating a toxic waste site for the neighborhoods in Orange County as a co-chair in CalPERG. And then also taking on Chevron just 1 year out of law school as an activist. And that really is something that has propelled me to run for this position, because I'm sort of just tired of seeing politicians running for these offices. I want someone who has the groundwork, who has been in the community, to be in these offices, because my goal is to make sure that we're changing the office to run for the people. And as the only person who's actually worked in the criminal division of the city attorney's office, I have a lot of insight that no one else has, because the city attorney in that office, the criminal division and the civil division are walled off. And so I was able to see firsthand the racial profiling of people of color in our communities by LAPD. I was able to see the criminalization of poverty firsthand, but also the fact that our city doesn't take hit and runs seriously. And we're actually the capital of hit and runs in the country. And we aren't doing enough to not only prevent them, but prosecute them. And a friend of a friend, his name is Woon, he was killed by a hit and run driver. And I helped advocate for making sure there was justice on his behalf, as well as other people who have been killed. And Andrew Gellmer was killed in Griffith Park a few years ago. And that is what propelled finally for us to see some developments in terms of making that park safer. But I was also advocating even before that happened, and with the parks and the city and the council member to make changes, because we shouldn't have to wait for someone to die in our city before we make changes to make our streets safer.
So I do want to back up and clarify. You have the city attorney, you have the prosecutor, or district attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might not understand the difference between those. So how does the role of a city attorney differ from that of a prosecutor? You said you were working in the criminal division. What does that look like?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for asking that. I think there's actually a lot of overlap. We actually do the role of the district attorney when it comes to misdemeanors. So the city attorney actually prosecutes all of the misdemeanors in the city of Los Angeles.
I know, because I got one.
Oh yeah, I know. I wanted to use your video to show, I haven't had time to do, but I wanted to share your video to show the fact that you had to take off time, work and school to deal with this. And that's, why I want to prevent cases from being filed in the first place. We shouldn't be filing cases against people that, can ruin their job prospects, can affect their livelihoods. But yeah, so they prosecute all the misdemeanors in the city of Los Angeles, and that's actually the bulk of LAPD arrests. And that can range from tickets like you got to even domestic violence or even vehicular manslaughter. So it can range from a lot of really serious crimes. And what I've seen in prior city attorneys and our current city one is people who get into the office without any criminal justice experience, who don't know how to lead that office because they've never even done a jury trial. They've never been in that position. They've never been in a courtroom where somebody had to was remanded just because a judge thought that they should be because they were late to court, and seeing the horror in a mother's eyes because of that. And I think having that firsthand insight is incomparable to just having reading a position paper or something like that. And the city attorney does so in conjunction with the district attorney, does prosecute crimes, and there's actually an agreement, and it's in the charter as well. And one thing that the district attorney doesn't do is it defends all the lawsuits, of which we have plenty, and that includes police misconduct lawsuits as well as the lawsuits right now against not enforcing Measure HLA, or lawsuits when somebody is on a bike and injures themselves and they sue the city because their streets are terrible. It also includes advising the mayor and city council and the 50 departments commissions. That includes like the land use commission, the police commission on the laws, and it also includes advising LADWP, the ports of LA, the airports, and filing affirmative litigation. And that includes suing landlords for not doing repairs, suing employers for not, for wage theft, or suing, other governmental entities for federal overreach or other violations of the rights of constituents.
So let's pause right there. The city attorney, you mentioned you need to have trial experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you say gives you the edge here. But the city attorney is also a managerial job. Like you're overseeing more than 1,000 employees in the city of Los Angeles. So what makes you prepared to handle a workforce of that size, direct people to take on certain cases? Like what gives you the leadership experience for this role?
I think that's such an important question because very few candidates actually have any type of managerial experience. When I was in legal aid, I helped start up 2 different programs on affirmative litigation, as well as a program to defend small businesses, low-income small businesses, and that required creating, the policies and the formulas and the website and how, and also like what the roles are for the staff that we hire. And I think it's important to have that experience, and as well as supervising other people. When I was in small business administration, I was like a quality assurance supervisor as well, that I was promoted to supervising other people's work in the federal government. When I was at the Department of Justice, I helped supervise the clerks and the other clerks and the interns, and making sure that they were complying with whatever the judges wanted, and making sure that we were following the law when it comes to really important immigration cases. And so I have experience creating projects. I have experience managing people, and I've been doing. And this isn't, my work didn't just start after law school. I've held jobs since I was 18 years old, and I've worked in a myriad of different industries. And I started off as just a minimum wage worker in fast food, and I think it's really important to have the understanding of just a regular day worker as well as the management.
Real quick, so I'm also in law school. You went to law school.
Yeah.
What did you do between undergrad and law school?
Well, I got a master's, and I worked at the Khmer Rouge Tribunal in Cambodia. I also worked in different. I worked in a marketing, like a news release agency as well, and then I also worked in an organization called the League of. It's on my LinkedIn. It's the National Cities organization, and I helped map a project on how to integrate immigrants into cities, and we were modeling after the city of Indianapolis. And that was like a guide on how to improve the integration of immigrants into cities.
Yeah,
National League of Cities, something like that.
It's interesting. I asked that question. I feel like it's an important aside because, there's a class of law school students who go KJD, kindergarten through JD, KJDs, and we make fun of them a little bit because they don't have any life experience aside from being a lawyer. So I think it's important that people have other experience, have held random jobs here and there.
Well, I also want to expand. Actually, a lot of people have come up to me saying they want to go to law school, and I'm like, work first, don't just jump in. Yeah. And I think a couple of things that are really important. I actually met with the City Attorneys Union and actually presented a lot of my ideas to them. And a lot of big issues in city hiring, and this is something that I advocated for when I was working in legal aid, is to make sure that we are hiring based on a holistic, view of principles. Because there's a lot of issues with nepotism in city hiring that I saw when I worked in the city, and making sure that we're hiring people regardless of whether or not they come from like an Ivy League school, because that was a big pattern when I was working in the city attorney's office.
Absolutely.
Is not recognizing that people come from diverse experiences. And a big problem, just like our outsourcing to these expensive law firms, is we are not looking at people who actually have municipal law, experience. We're not looking at people who actually have real direct on-the-ground experience. Rather, we're going to people who have worked, with mergers and acquisitions, who don't necessarily have the direct relevance, and we don't need to pay them $1,000 an hour to do a case that really is just you can hire a municipal attorney for, and making sure also that we have an office, because when I worked there was a lot of kind of essentially chaos, in the sense that it wasn't very well organized. In the sense of the line of supervision and line of duties, and people didn't even know, like I didn't know who to get my rap sheets from, like to get a document about someone's criminal history, because there wasn't clear responsibilities and assignments on who would be your secretary, or who clear line on supervisor, and just having more transparency on the tree of line of division and supervision. And I think having worked in the San Diego City Attorney's Office and having that comparison is really helpful to see how we could actually improve and have a much more well-organized office. And having worked in legal aid, I can see how we can have a much better hiring policy that can be more holistic, that we currently don't really have anything that's explicit on that. And we don't even have anything explicit, and I'm sorry, but like, we don't even have anything explicit. You can go to the district attorney's website and you will see a sort of a guideline on what kind of cases we should file, what kind of cases, like, in terms of there's misconduct, we shouldn't file those cases. We don't have anything explicit in the city attorney's office, and I'm actually in a Public Records Act war with them in terms of trying to get more information. And a lot of the information I've gotten, I had to get Public Records Act requests, because there's complete lack of transparency in that office.
Yeah, so you brought up a good point, which I think it makes a nice segue. Which is that the city attorney's office right now spends a ton of money on outside counsel to prosecute cases that we might not need to pursue. For instance, I'm thinking of Venistel, where the city attorney's office has spent a ton of taxpayer money on lawyers from these prestigious law firms, basically to block housing. So how do you fix that practice? The role of the city attorney is like prosecutorial. That's the role of lawyers inherently, kind of, I feel like, to say no to stuff. So like, how do you change the role of the city attorney to be an office that says yes to things, that facilitates the construction of housing?
I think there's an issue where we have too much money in our elections, and so when people come into office and they're heavily funded by PACs or landlords or whatnot, they have already a political inclination when they're in office, and they're looking to whoever they supported them in office. And as the only people-powered campaign, I already have an edge in the sense that I'm actually accountable to the people. But I think Venistel and these other lawsuits are really politically motivated in terms of how they're being obstructed. But it's not just Venistel. I think is like, obviously we approved the affordable housing. I think that one is like an easy fix. But it's also the lawsuit that Lane brought against the city regarding the fact that we are not doing enough to take care of our unhoused population. And that lawsuit was earmarked for about $900,000 in legal fees, and it's now up to $7.5 million, and something like a 800% increase in outside legal fees. And it's all going to Gibson Dunn, which have charged our city $1,000 for work lunches. It's just ridiculous. And that case should have been settled. What we should have done is settle. Instead, we're fighting it because Mayor Bass didn't want to have a deposition, because the city does not want to agree to providing housing for our unhoused population. And actually, there's another lawsuit that even broke off of that, which behind closed doors, our city council approved the sweep of 9,000 homeless encampments. Yeah. And under the Brown Act, that should have been decided in open doors. At the minimum, the vote should have been reported, and it never was. We were sued for that too, and we had to pay $2 million in legal fees just for that lawsuit.
So just circling back, I mean, those are all egregious examples, but what do you do specifically on Venistel? Like, say you take office, what's the thing that you do as city attorney to make sure that Venistel gets built as fast as possible?
Well, I mean, obviously we would fast track approval of these permits and these projects and these contracts, which right now the city attorney is creating reasoning and saying like, oh, this is, no bid and all these other excuses to try to delay the approval of this type of housing. And so she is creating, it's the same thing with the State House LA contract, which she also created an obstruction for, is creating these artificial disagreements. And it just shows the city attorney has so much power in terms of contracts because of procurement. And so we should really take this office seriously. But it's a very simple procedure of approving, and not only that, but wanting to fast track affordable housing like this, because like you had said, that they are in a position to approve these types of contracts and not being a bottleneck for them, instead trying to actually bring them to the head of the line.
Yeah. So staying on housing for a minute, I'm not sure your stance on this, but there's a couple of specific projects that I see as litmus tests for the city's stance on housing, and one of those is 4th and Central. So at the corner of 4th and Central in downtown Los Angeles, we have a cold storage warehouse. It's like on the edge of Skid Row in Little Tokyo, and there's a plan to redevelop it into about 1,500 units of housing. I want to say it's like 12% income restricted affordable. Don't quote me on that, but it's around there. The project will include a ton of open green space. It's designed by the architect who designed the Smithsonian African American Museum, or maybe it's not the Smithsonian, but anyways, so that's the project. 1,500 units of new housing to replace a cold storage unit, and local community activists are protesting because they feel like there's not enough income restricted affordable housing in this project. How do you respond to that as a city attorney? Do you take the stance of standing in the way of projects that you feel don't have enough income restricted affordable housing, or do you encourage infill development, particularly on these lots that aren't being used for housing already?
I think that question, well, I'm familiar with the project. I've seen stuff online about it. I do think the city attorney shouldn't take a political position on something like what is happening now, which is trying to obstruct housing from being built, because I'm actually on the Planning and Land Use Commission committee of my local neighborhood council, and I've actually dealt with the approval and developers trying to seek our approval of housing. I do think what is important and what is not happening is that we make sure that developers are not misrepresenting any projects, which is what I've seen in my neighborhood council, where they are misrepresenting the environmental impact of certain projects in order to get CEQA basically kind of like loopholes. And I think that we have to make sure that projects are getting approved, but not being abusively approved, so that we're not watering down. Because I think you also mentioned that CEQA is important for environmental protections, but we also want to make sure that developers are not misrepresenting themselves to abuse it, and then that ends up being taken away, those loopholes. Because I already seen projects where they lie about what kind of trees are being taken down, or even the massive carbon emissions of removal of dirt and whatnot on a site. And that's something that I deal with right now, actually, in a housing project. So I want to make sure that is enforced, but I don't think that I would stand in the way of something that is filed properly, that is following the laws, because I think that's a problem, is that the city attorney's office becomes too politicized. I do think that we should make sure that the communities are informed, because the reality is that a lot of these communities that are getting developed are more low income. And these are people who have already experienced years of redlining, years of basically being ignored by the city. And I think it's really important to bring people to the table and to make sure that they're on board. And it's something that doesn't really, cost money per se. I know it costs delays, but we want to make sure that everybody is included, because otherwise then it feels like another form of kind of, being pushed around in a history of a city that has caused urban renewal with freeways going through, communities of color, or other forms of development like the Dodger Stadium. And so it's really important to kind of just be attuned with these communities and their concerns, and include them on these dialogues, because at the end of the day, they are, to me, so important, and they should be treated just as well and as much time as people in more affluent areas that get way more attention and way more time with their elected leaders. And I think they should be awarded the same amount of time and energy as people who have much more resources.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. But the problem with housing, right, is that it's tricky, because people see their communities change as new housing is built, and they associate that with a higher cost of living and the things that are causing longtime residents to leave. But it's complicated. So picture a scenario where this is happening in Buena Vista as well, right by the A-Line Chinatown station.
Yeah.
You have a vacant lot, it's transit adjacent, and the developer wants to put a bunch of housing there. That's realistically probably going to be unaffordable for the people that probably, that are in the community and want to stay there. But like, if you include the community, they're going to be against it, right? People, and for understandable reasons, right? But ultimately, if we don't build this thing, it's like a giant vacant lot. How do you remedy that situation, or how do you see the role of the city attorney? Like, if people from the community come to you and they're like, Ida, we need you to stop this development, make them put affordable housing in there. How do you involve the community in that process? Do you tell them, hey, look, like, this is going to reduce gentrification by attracting the people who would otherwise move into the community and displace longtime residents? Do you side with their concerns and say it'll contribute to gentrification? What's your stance on that? How do you see yourself getting involved in those sorts of debates?
Well, I think there's three issues going on here. One, I think it's communities that, again, have experienced a lot. You have to look at the history of Chinatown. Chinatown itself was moved around because of a history, and actually Little Tokyo, because of a history of racism in our communities. And they've experienced tremendous amounts of violence. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that first before we even get to the topic of housing, because I think at the end of the day, we have a focus on areas that are already zoned multifamily, and they are actually receiving the bulk of these developments, while areas that are more affluent are not seeing the same sort of push for development, because you see the pushback with Vedestel. Yeah. So I think that already signals an issue, I think, for the community, and I understand that where it's not being evenly placed because of zoning issues. Yeah. And I think that's something that should definitely be addressed, and I think something like SB 79 is supposed to address those things. But so I think that is something that's a valid concern. I do think, and I would encourage the council members to do this, because this is something I've seen in other cities, like even in San Diego, that our council members really take a back seat in terms of negotiating with these developers to increase the affordability, the percentage of affordable housing. I've seen in San Diego even where the council member will negotiate with the developer and they will increase those percentages to 25 to 50% to middle income and low income units. And I think that the problem is that our council members really are not being strong advocates enough in terms of negotiating better types of deals for the community. And that's something I would definitely encourage them to do. And then the third thing that the city attorney can overtly do is actually be a champion for tenants' rights. We have the tenant anti-harassment ordinance, and we also have like our housing codes, and making sure that we are there for the tenants to champion their rights. So if they are dealing with landlords that are trying to push them out, that we will make sure that their rights are being represented. And that's something that I did, outside of even my legal work is, above Golden Saddle Cyclery, RIP, there was they were pushed out because of a boutique hotel. And above them were these units of, a lot of these people who were elderly who had lived there for decades. And they were getting pushed out by the hotel. And I just advised them of their rights. And they were able to also use that to negotiate for better terms in terms of like being pushed out. But the reality is we want to keep people in their homes. And we want to do that in a way that uplifts the community, that gives them more resources, because to me, these people are what make LA, and if we are going to make LA more unaffordable, or if we're pushing out the people who have been here for generations, then what service are we providing?
Yeah. One moment, I'm just going to check my camera.
I hope everything's good.
Make sure we're still recording.
Okay, let me just drink some water. That guy looks like Ted Cruz.
Oh, it's nice out here. I was a little worried about the security guys.
I saw you looking. I was just like,
oh,
that's funny.
Don't shut us down.
It's a public space, but yeah, I know. Oh, yeah. They have yelled at cyclists before.
Yeah, yeah. No hammocking in these trees either. I mean, I guess that makes sense.
You can hammock in Griffith Park. I've seen people up there hammocked,
yeah.
but that's just, oh god.
I came up here. I was doing the thing, and he was like, "No, you can't. No hammocks allowed."
These people don't want us to have fun. It's just
they don't want us to lounge.
It's just like, this is a public space. Like, my tax dollars pay for this. Why won't you let me use it? You know?
Yeah.
All right. Anyways.
So, back to the housing question. I guess the flip side of that, and interesting that you brought up San Diego, because San Diego has seen a decrease in median rents. I think that the Bay Area has seen a decrease in rents as well. I just got back from visiting my friends in Oakland, and they're paying $700, and they're just a bunch of.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I can't testify to that, because when I was there, I was paying more rent than I was in LA in law school, and at the same time, I don't know what's going on there. So.
But well, it's because the Bay Area is built a lot, and because they understand that not all the housing needs to be 100% permanent, supportive, affordable housing in order for it to get built. That building more of all types will create an affordable market for regular people, and that's just like my friends. And I feel very envious of that. Honestly, I was like, seeing the Bay Area representatives vote for SB 79 unequivocally. It was like the Bay Area carried Los Angeles, and down here we're still playing to these outdated concerns and the homeowner NIMBYism, and I don't know. I want to live, so I thought that was.
They have better transit than we do too. They have a much more pervasive transit system, which is really nice. Their bus system is so great. Their train system obviously their train system can be much better. I mean, it's a little expensive, but their bus system is really amazing, and so is the Muni. So I think that also helps as well.
Yeah, well, BART's thriving.
Yeah, but it could be. I mean, because you have to pay by distance, it can get big expensive.
Yeah. I guess. That's a question that I'll ask since we're on the topic. So BART is a good example of this. BART's expensive, but also BART has invested in fare gates. They spent $90 million on fare gates, and they pretty much eliminated maintenance costs related to people vandalizing the train. We're seeing a decrease in electronic thefts. Like, it's now safe enough where regular people can do work on their laptops on the train, which is something that you can't say all the time in Los Angeles.
I don't know of any thefts in Metro.
Do you feel comfortable opening your laptop on the A line?
I mean, I don't. I grew up, in Whittier and Canoga Park, and in areas where, and I went to law school in the Bay, and people were getting their cars broken into, and so I have like a very different, like a street, street sense, in that sense where I'm not going to put valuables. I mean, I went to grad school in DC
me too, but the question is, should we be facilitating an environment where people need to feel on guard all the time?
Well, I don't think we're facilitating an environment. I think the issue, and I don't know of any thefts per se, but I do think that we're kind of talking about a symptom rather than finding like a cure for it. And I know of people who have dealt with issues with these new gates, and they're also very costly. And I think we haven't even, I mean, you're comparing two different systems that are so different in the sense that, like, our system is, we don't even have frequent enough buses. We don't have frequent enough trains. They're not as pervasive. And so a big issue to counter thefts or even crime is just having more people on these transit systems.
So let me ask you this then. Do you think that more people are not taking public transit in Los Angeles because of the cost or because they feel unsafe?
I think it's because of access. I think we don't have, I don't think that we have trains that run as frequently as they should. I don't think that we have, I mean, our lines are just go to downtown. We don't have a web necessarily. And so if you're not going to work in downtown, it's harder to use the train. So I think the bigger issue, and people have told me that, like, their transit is not close to them. Like, they have to walk blocks to get to a bus stop. They have to walk, like, my train stop is a mile away from where I live. And so it's not that convenient in that sense. So I think a lot of people are not using it for that reason. Also, I mean, after COVID, the numbers just plummeted also because of people started working from home. And I know there's a perception of a crime on the train, and I think that's a big issue in terms of a rise of poverty, a rise of houselessness, and the fact that our city doesn't do enough to provide social programs. And I think that the Bay does way more as well. So it's like we have, like the fact that we're in a lawsuit right now for not, helping unhoused people, and we have the largest population, and our city is, spending money on other things that could go to better social services, and it's cutting programs. Like the county just cut, I think 8 health clinics recently. And so if we're cutting all these services and then saying, we should focus more on policing, we have to do a holistic thing. We can't just focus on one thing and think that's the end all be all. And I think that's the problem, is that in San Diego there was also a hepatitis crisis because they didn't have accessible shelter or bathrooms for the unhoused. And so again, we can talk about them trying to put more unhoused people in jail, or even people who are under substance abuse or whatnot, but I don't think that's dealing with the issues.
Just staying on the issue, do you think that fare gates and fare enforcement would improve safety on the metro?
I don't know if it would, and I think we're actually spending more money on policing now than the fares themselves.
Well, I'm not saying policing, having tap to exit and gates that work so people can't press the emergency exit and just go through.
Yeah, I think we should look at how much money is being spent on that first and see is there another thing that we could spend money on, because I think a big issue is Metro, and Metro has nothing to do with the city attorney's office too. It's a separate agency for the county.
That's a good point.
LADOT is the only agency part of the city, and LADOT actually today is a fare-free day too. So
I took the bus fare-free.
Yeah, and so Dash buses, commuter buses during COVID, they were free, and I think that was really great. Again, Metro isn't part of the city, but I do think that Metro spends too much money on freeways, and actually I looked at the police budget, and they were spending more time on overtime for LAPD than even just the regular salaries.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about budget, and so that's what I would look at first.
Yeah. No, that's a good point that Metro is not a city agency. Yeah.
Though Alex Sokoloff didn't seem to think it was when he was asking Kenneth Meow to audit them. So.
Where's the audit? I saw that video. People were clowning him.
I was just they're not part of. But it's a problem in the sense I was talking to someone who's who oversees Metro? It's this weird floating body between the county and the city, and it's
they
a little bit
cast wizard spells to get funding and whatnot.
It's concerning because we should probably also put people on that board that actually bike and take the train too regularly.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to close out with a couple of questions. We're going to talk about bikes and bike infrastructure. I guess
please.
The first thing that I noticed was you said that the city attorney's office prosecutes misdemeanors, and for the uninitiated, explain how traffic violence is prosecuted, and also if you're advocating for harsher penalties for traffic violence, doesn't that remove those things from your jurisdiction and pass them to the district attorneys? If it's a felony for, vehicular assault or manslaughter, doesn't that mean it's now a district attorney problem?
Well, no.
Or am I misunderstanding?
The problem is there's pretty much no penalties. So just any penalties right now, even community service would be better right now, because I've had friends who have been hit by cars, left bleeding in the road, and the LAPD will tell them, I'm not going to investigate this case because you're not severely injured or dead. Mm-hmm. And it's just that these cases are not even taken seriously or investigated properly. And as city attorney, I would direct LAPD to do that, actually start taking these cases seriously and investigating them. And when they come to my office, then we would actually actually investigate these cases and pursue them. And but like I was saying, vehicular manslaughter is a misdemeanor, so you don't necessarily have to get to the felony level. And felony is usually when someone is killed. It's not necessarily when someone is injured. So a lot of these cases would be misdemeanors, and we don't necessarily have to put people in jail. It could be something where it's community service or something like that, where at least there's some kind of penalty showing that. In any other district or even country, there is something where somebody has to take classes or gets their driver's license suspended. That's another thing, is that the DMV often is not suspending licenses because the prosecutor's offices are not effectively following up. So you'll even see someone committed a DUI and not have their license probably suspended. So we would also make sure to take those things seriously. And I think that's a big problem in our office, and especially in Los Angeles, the fact that they're just not taken seriously. And actually there was because hit and runs are so big in Los Angeles, the LAPD finally did something like they paid for an alert system that's supposed to go out when someone gets a hit and run so that they can get information, and they don't even use that.
Yeah.
So it's like we have some resources we're not even using. We need somebody in the office to actually, push the offices to do something.
Yeah, so you're a cyclist.
Yes.
Why? Why are you passionate about this? Why does it matter to you, and why do you think it's an issue that people should care about?
Well, I actually taught myself how to ride a bike as an adult, and
No way.
and like my mom didn't know how to ride a bike, and in Iran it's not a big thing for women to ride bikes. It's changed tremendously now, but yeah, I bought my first bike actually during COVID lockdown, and I really got into it. It was amazing, the open streets at that time. I would ride from Los Feliz to Pasadena, and I was riding around. I even ended up doing gravel races and things like that. I was really into biking, but what I noticed, one thing was it's amazing. Like being on a bike, you see the city in such a different, perspective. You connect more with nature. You can see the city in a more open perspective, and you connect with the people. Even like I would play music on my speaker on my bike, and people were into the tunes. It's like you're creating community, and it's so different than just driving somewhere. And just 50 years ago, I think about 70% of kids used to bike to school. But what I also noticed is a rise in traffic violence and a rise in people being killed on our streets. And that I was first introduced to that with Woon, who was a friend of a friend who was killed and in South LA. And the fact that these issues are not taken that seriously by our city, and I ended up actually getting really involved with the community, with Damien Kevin of Streets Are for Everyone and Streets for All, and other bike organizations like People for Mobility Justice, to try to advocate for safer streets, and actually joined my neighborhood council on the transportation committee, and became a really big advocate on safer streets. And something that we did temporarily during COVID, which were the slow streets. I don't know if people remember, they were like little placards, like slow down, and they wanted to create more permanent infrastructure. And LADOT offered us a mile of slow streets infrastructure, and I spearheaded doing a survey of our community, and we did outreach. I was out there on Hillhurst or Vermont Avenue trying to get people to do our survey, and we got hundreds of results. And I went through that survey, and I saw that so many people wanted more streets than what LADOT was offering. And so I did a pitch to try to get more like roundabouts and bollards in our streets, and I was able to obtain them. So we got 50% more slow streets and treatments in other neighborhoods, and I think that's so important to have done the work on the ground. And I also advocated for, basically what we're seeing now in Griffith Park, which is like, better treatments, reducing the lanes. And I've gotten speed bumps in my neighborhood. I've actually, lobbied the city to even repave roads, because just small things like that can prevent people from colliding into pedestrians. And I think a big problem in our city that I've seen through my work is we have, and hopefully the infrastructure plan resolves this, but we have 8 different agencies resolving streets and sidewalks, and we have people who are in office who are not that strong advocates for these issues. And I think having a strong advocate for safer streets is so imperative in a time where more people are getting killed in our streets than homicides by cars. And actually, cars are the #1 killer of kids as well. And beyond cycling, I also walk. I take the bus and the train as much as I can, but I haven't been biking as much, which I really, really miss. And I wish, I just came across one of my old Strava posts or whatever, and I was just like, oh, I used to
That's okay. Yeah.
bike so much. And but there's nothing like the endorphins, and it's just uplifting just to be able to bike and enjoy the outside.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks, Aida.
Yeah.
Really appreciate the interview.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Thanks for speaking with me.
Yeah.